Now, when the Chinese did an intrusion all along 3 points basically, starting from Gogra, Galwan, Hot Spring, Pengong, so uh, it was necessary for us to unsettle them. Okay. Now, Kailash Range is a feature which exposes the underbelly of China. That means their entire build-up west of Kailash ranges is seen by, visually seen by the Indian troops. De-radicalization is a program where you target people who are motivated toward the terror ideology, who are willing to undertake violent actions, but they have still not taken the step to become a terrorist, right? First of all, army formally does not have any de-radicalization camps, right? I must make that very clear to you. Okay, see, to first make things clear, Rizangla feature was earlier held by us during the 1962 war. If you recollect and go back to history, we fought a brave battle there, 13 Kumaon. So it is that we did not actually go across, but we only went to where our territories are as perceived by both the sides. Okay, so as far as factual position goes, we have held on to our areas, fine. But over a period of time, there were some agreements made, and they were holding on to Maldo, and we were on to the Chusul Heights. Now, when the Chinese did an intrusion all along at 3 points basically, starting from Gogra, Galwan, Hot Spring, Pengong, so it was necessary for us to unsettle them. Okay. Now, Kailash Range is a feature which exposes the underbelly of China. That means their entire build-up west of Kailash ranges is seen by, visually seen by the Indian troops. And the entire northern bank of Pengong Tso could be dominated by us. Okay. So, the critical position of Kailash ranges was such that it turned the defenses of Chinese, and hence the Chinese were unsettled, and therefore it was a game changer. It is this particular occupying of the features which led to the Chinese recoiling. They tried to resist it, but ultimately it was the steadfastness of our troops which held on to these features, and the Chinese had to finally give way. Okay, there are questions asked as to if it is so important, why did we leave it? First of all, I think we must grant it to the army or the defense forces and the government that whatever decision they have taken in the interest of the country. That is one. So therefore, the ground position as far as the Pengong Tso area is concerned has been reinstated, which was important for us. And the way Chinese have run away, it showed that even they were very keen to get out of that place. As far as the other areas are concerned, I think in some more time frame, they would withdraw from there. Coming on to pre-April 2020 situation of Depsang, etc., the talks would go on, and I'm sure given the leverages which I spoke about in the response to your first question, ultimately the Chinese will have to give way sooner or later. Maybe not today, but maybe tomorrow. And the third thing which we must keep in mind is that we would have our responses in place should somebody try to retake Kailash ranges. We beat them first time in the run to the Kailash ranges, we'll beat them again. Okay, so we don't have the full details, so we should not talk more on this. Suffice it to say for the people of India that we would have our responses in place to ensure that we do not lose our strategic advantage, both operational and strategic advantage as far as this particular area is concerned. At the outset, Abhishek, let me tell you that India's official position still remains the same, what it was at the time of independence. That is, that we recognize the Johnson Line in the Ladakh sector and McMahon Line in the northeastern sector, which is the Arunachal, Bhutan and the Sikkim border, right? And in the central sector, the boundary is more or less defined with minor differences in some places or the other, but those I suppose in fact we have also exchanged maps of the central sector, although later on there was some not recognition by the Chinese of those maps, and so I will not go into that, but the fact is the major differences are in the area of western and the northeastern sector, which is the McMahon Line and the Johnson Line. Now, as far as our functionaries, whether they are in the government or the politicians are concerned, of not raising this issue is concerned, I don't think it's correct. At right forums, in various international forums such as UN, etc., we have been telling about this particular difference in the perception, as we say nowadays, of the boundary. We maintain that we follow the British and the Tibetan agreement which took place. For the Ladakh it was in the 1860, and in the McMahon Line it was I think 1904 or something. So I'm not, I don't recollect the exact year, but these Shimla agreement is what it is known as. Both these agreements are recognized by us as our boundary. We assume that once the British, we got independence from the British, we inherited that boundary, right? And we have been saying about it. Now there have been always offers and counter offers which have been taking place about what is ours and what is yours. You give this and you take this, but nothing has been formally agreed upon, right? So it's only that we are trying to maintain an international diplomatic nuance while raising the issue with China, okay? We also know that we have to first grow stronger economically. So we don't want to create a war hysteria by every time repeating our claims, okay? So I think from the perspective of recognizing that the areas which are disputed are ours, the government is very clear. It has raised the issues on a number of occasions when required. Yes, it has not made it into a rhetoric, which I feel is right also, because as of now, India's priority, India is way behind China as far as our economic gap is concerned, and also military gap. The Chinese economy is 14.5 trillion and we are around 2.9 trillion. See how many times more they are. And in PPP terms, the Chinese are already ahead of America. In PPP terms, the Chinese are ahead of America, not behind. So in PPP terms, China is first, America is second, and then is India. And the gap between the first two and India is so large that we do require that period of peace and stability to grow. So I think it's just a perception what you have mentioned. We are very firm in our raising the issue, and at the same time we are not making it into a rhetoric. Okay. First of all, Army formally does not have any de-radicalization camps, right? I must make that very clear to you. Army essentially is undertaking counter-terror operations through RR and counter-infiltration operations through the deployment along our LC, the line of control. Okay. Now, so the as far as de-radicalization is concerned, I must also clarify to you what is de-radicalization and rehabilitation. Normally we loosely refer to the two as the same. It is not the same. De-radicalization is a program where you target people who are motivated towards the terror ideology, who are willing to undertake violent actions, but they have still not taken the step to become a terrorist, right? So they are still trying to decide that they would like to become a terrorist. Whereas in a rehabilitation program, these are those people who have already committed acts of terror and then either surrender or get captured as prisoners, and then they are being converted into a person who would go back to the society as a part of the normal living. Okay, so that is as far as theoretical difference between de-radicalization and rehabilitation is concerned. Now, de-radicalization programs per se in the valley by the army are in the form of a open program like Sadbhavna. Okay, so we run medical camps, we run dialogue between the Muslim clerics and the people and with the children. So therefore it's more of a generic nature of de-radicalization which we are doing. We open schools which are teaching secular values, etc. We try to wean away the local people to these schools, army schools, etc., which we have. Sadbhavna schools are there. So we are targeting a open de-radicalization as far as GNK is concerned. What I have learned, I'm not very sure, is that now there is a program which is being run by the civil government there about the Muslim clerics trying to preach liberal values to the people, and people can join these programs, but I'm not very sure about it. But something like this may be underway and would need a little more, I would say, examination. Formally, de-radicalization programs have been run in India in two states, Kerala and Maharashtra. In Kerala, it was for the ISIS, people who were joining the ISIS, and so was in the Maharashtra. The model of both these countries, both these states are different. In the case of Kerala, it was run by the community and the clerics, etc. In the case of and through the government effort. In the case of Maharashtra, it is the ATS which was responsible to conduct these de-radicalization programs. So both the models have their pluses and minuses. I feel security forces must not be involved in de-radicalization. It should be more left to the NGOs, universities, government agencies which are working in such like psychologists. They should be targeting the people who are affected by radical ideology to be converted back to the society. So that's as far as the radicalization question.